Hi, welcome back to another episode of the South Texas Power Lunch. I'm here with Nicole Toudouze from Transcendental. How are you, Nicole?
I'm good, Matt. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, we are so excited. If you remember, for those that have watched us for a while, we had Nicole on to talk about her company that is family focused, and we've gotten a lot of feedback from that. I know Nicole, as we were talking, had gotten some feedback as well, just about just the unique culture that you guys are creating there at Transcendental, and your success continues. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's exciting.
Well, we didn't get to talk much last time, and so I thank you for coming back so we could to talk really about the marketing side, because a lot of startups, actually every startup, as we're going to talk about, needs to be thinking about marketing. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people look at marketing and say, it's something I'd like to have, it's nice to have, but it's almost like throwing money away. They don't put it at the top of the list. Let's just start off with the most obvious question. What are those top 3 reasons why a company should have marketing at the top of their strategy and their top of their list?
Definitely. So whenever I start speaking to startups, usually right off the bat, the conversation is initiated with, I'm a startup.
Right.
So I don't need a big marketing program. I don't need a big marketing plan or a big marketing budget. I want to stay lean. And, there's some truth to that in terms of you got to be mindful of your spending as a startup, right? You can't, you can't take as many risks financially as more of an established company. However, it goes back to the age-old philosophy, you got to spend money to make money, essentially. And that's not the most eloquent way to answer the question, but marketing is an investment in your business. And I think a lot of small business owners and startups don't really take a step back and look at marketing the way they look at staffing or equipment or technology or software or training. And really it is one of those vital components to running a business. And whether your goal is to grow by 50% year over year, or your goal is just to maintain patient flow or steady customer traffic, marketing should be part of your startup program for sure. And a lot of startups, they get small business loans or startup financing, and most lenders in their loan allocation build in a marketing budget, because lenders want to see that you are investing in marketing. Why? Because everyone knows marketing works. The lenders know marketing works, and they would worry if you weren't investing in it, right? Because they obviously want you to succeed so you can pay back your loan. When you're going through your financing process, that's a great time to start talking to a marketing company and get an idea, at least of budget, even if it's not, the vendor you go with. They can walk you through kind of what the startup marketing program would look like for your company or your line of business, and how that would translate to your loan allocation. That's
great. I mean, it's so true. Everybody's like, I've only got a little bit of money, but if you have the best widget, hamburger, whatever we want to use, but no one knows about it, no one's going to buy it.
Oh
right.
My gosh.
And that's what marketing does, as far as get people to understand what that great thing that you have is.
Right.
So we're going to talk a little bit about messaging, as far as how do we look at the brand and how, you look at brands and how we should look at brands. Then strategy, because again, this is important, and being strategic, allows us to, make sure we're capitalizing on it. And then the other part is the data part, which in businesses that I've dealt with, they're like, well, you can't really measure marketing, right? I mean, it just kind of goes out into the ethos, and voila, a customer shows up, and who really knows? But that's actually really changed with technology. So I'm excited to talk about that. Yeah. But before we get down there, let's go back to the messaging and brand. Okay. Everybody talks about brand. Everybody talks about messaging. Mm-hmm. What are those key considerations for a startup and how they're designing their brand and their identity?
Right. So marketing and advertising has really shifted in the last 5 years, especially with the pandemic. It's gone from more of an advertising sort of cliche storyline to an actual story built around your brand identity. And so consumers or patients, in my field, they want to hear a story. They want something that's going to resonate with them. They don't just want to be sold to or advertised to. They want authenticity. That authenticity is king now, and content is king. And everybody says content is king, but I like to say content is king, but marketing is the queen. Okay, so you can have great content, but if you're not doing your marketing right, She runs the household. It's true.
It is. It is. Again, you can have great
philosophy.
content. Nobody knows it's out there.
Yeah.
There's no way it's going to be seen, right?
Exactly.
No, that makes sense.
Authenticity and developing a story. And, I read a book recently called Developing Your Story Brand, and it's a great book for any startup. I highly recommend it. I can't remember the author's name offhand. Sorry.
That's okay. We'll put it in the description when we put it out. You're good.
Yeah, put it in the notes. But definitely recommend that. I have a startup myself, right? I've been in marketing and advertising for 12 years, and I've been in the dental industry for 10, but my own agency outside of consulting was founded a year ago. So I'm still a startup. And, I understand the limitations on budget and financials. I really get that. Of course, as a marketing agency, we're not cutting back on our marketing. But so what we've really had to work on in the last year, and what we help our clients do, is develop your brand story. And your brand story starts by, answering the question really of who you are. Mm-hmm. Not just who you are to you, but who do you want to be to your community? Who do you want to be to the people that you're serving? What do you want people to say about you, right, when you're not around? And, when a lot of business owners, when they think about a brand, their immediate thought is, what do you think it is?
The logo.
Logo.
Yeah.
And they don't really think beyond that.
Right.
But the logo is just one facet of the brand. And the brand really is the sum of all experiences, your consumer or patient has with your practice or your company. And so, it's important to really consider who you are, what you want your message to be. So in addition to your logo, you're thinking about colors, even a color palette, right? Certain colors, we know in marketing psychology make consumers feel certain ways, make audiences feel certain ways. Your brand voice, how are you going to write your copy? What are the words you're going to use? Your photography, videography. So video now is super, super important. And the reason being, it helps you bring that brand story we're talking about to life. So what we find is, like on a website, for instance, video increases conversion of a user to a prospect to a customer by 60%.
Wow.
To get them to act on your conversion on your website.
Video versus just plain text.
Or image.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so like say you land on a homepage and there's a static image.
Right.
You have 2 to 3 seconds essentially to capture the user's attention.
Right.
That's what we found in marketing. And so if there's a video in the header instead of an image, you're immediately drawn in.
Sorry, I'm just thinking about our website going, well, we could check that box. All right, keep on going, Nicole.
Why haven't I looked at your website yet? No, I have, but...
It's got a video when you first got there. So, all right, there we go. That was by accident, not by design.
Yeah. That's a huge component of it, is video, because that's all about storytelling, right? So we do a lot of videography in our agency, a lot of photography, because people don't want stock photos anymore.
Right.
They don't want stock photos anymore. They don't want to feel like they're being sold to. They want to see the people they're going to see when they walk through your doors.
Right.
And a lot of companies and business owners, when they think about a website, for instance, they're thinking, oh, just a part of my marketing plan. But no, your website is your first storefront. It's as important as your storefront if you have a brick and mortar or an office.
Right.
So, I think when we're talking about investment and you're talking about developing your brand story, what is more important than that? What is more important than the experience you're creating for your customers? Because at the end of the day, that really is your product.
That's true.
Yeah.
That very is true.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. I mean, I deal with extremely large companies. I deal with very small companies. There's something called a brand identity when you're looking at brand standards. Sorry,
Right.
I lost that for a second. What's the value of brand standards for a company? Because I'm sure many people don't even know what are brand standards?
Yeah. Well, brand standards would be part of your brand identity. Brand standards or brand guidelines or brand style guide. There's lots of acronyms.
Y'all are worse than lawyers.
Though what that is basically defining the visual components of your brand. And the importance of that really ties back to the fact that when we're talking about branding, consistency is crucial.
Right.
So the reason we develop style guides or brand guidelines for our clients is because we want a Bible, essentially, of how to apply this brand and how to communicate it to the audience. And so if you're, and my clients sometimes make fun of me because I am such a stickler for brand guidelines and brand styles. And so, for instance, a client will try to replicate a color.
Right.
Or a different font.
Yeah.
Or they'll try to replicate the logo or distort the proportions of the logo so it looks all squished, things like that. And it seems like those things really wouldn't matter or play a part in your business success, but over time they do.
Right.
And subconsciously sometimes, but they do. They weigh into the success of your business. So it's important to have a brand style guide established as part of your brand identity. It's going to include your typefaces that you're able to use for body copy, for headlines, for subheads. It's going to include the different ways you can use your logo and the different ways you shouldn't apply your logo. It's going to include brand.
Both very important.
Yes.
Do's and do nots.
Yes. Yeah. As parents, we know.
Yes.
Let me be clear both ways. And then also colors, like color palettes. I mentioned, here are the primary colors. Here are the complementary colors.
Right.
Here's, we go as far as to when we design websites, we develop logic for our buttons. So if a button is for getting more information, that's a different color than a button that's for a call to action.
Okay.
And so we define all of that because over time, when you do these things consistently well and repeatedly, the brand gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And, like big brands like Pepsi or Coca-Cola, they have their brand guidelines online public.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go look at them.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, any really a big brand will. And why? Because they want to be held accountable for what their brand identity is.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that you bring this up because you had mentioned this in a second ago about, when people say brand, they typically talk about logo. And that's something that I get a lot here, at the law office is, I need this trademarked. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, well, number one, is it trademarkable? Right. Which would mean, is it something that's even unique?
Yeah,
right. And then there's a process for that. But people just are like, well, that's my brand. I need to get out there. And I'm like, yeah, not really.
Yeah.
It's a logo. And what we associate with Nike swoosh, the Disney logos, is the emotion and the effect of the marketing that we feel based on effective marketing in that logo. Right. And so that's why we have that misconception.
And that's all repetition.
It is.
Repetition
and it's all brand guidelines.
Yes. Yes.
Which, by the way, I'm going to just say the aside. In working with businesses, I think that the marketing community needs to come up with something of, I'm sorry, that's off-brand. For something.
Oh, I use that phrase daily.
I am sure y'all do. And you know what? You can go ahead and submit one to the lawyers about what we say, and we'll just trade one. But the whole off-brand, on-brand thing, I'm like, what does that mean, really? Anyway, sorry.
Our clients will send us stuff, and I'm like, materials or things, and I'm like,
that's off-brand.
Please let me redo this. Please let me fix it.
It's like a polite way of saying, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Let's talk about another interesting aspect with regard to small companies, actually any company, is the brand association with the culture.
Oh, yeah.
How, a lot of times the way I view it is when we do focus on marketing, which not everybody does, it's external marketing.
Yep.
And we think of that logo as this is us on the outside. But the great companies see that not just as what is it to the outside, but what is it to the inside of the organization. How does that relate? How should startups be thinking about that?
So we actually, for a few of our clients and practices, we've developed basically a brand identity that's internal facing.
Okay.
And that includes core values. It includes tone. It includes mission, vision. It includes market positioning, things that your employees need to understand because they are part of that brand voice.
Right.
And they are the ones interacting with your
They're the most powerful one, actually.
Yes, exactly. And what drives word of mouth? What drives buzz? It's your team. The experience delivered by your team internally is one that that outside of your external marketing program is going to be what sustains you. It's going to make or break you. That's why hiring is so important, and training. And I tell my clients all the time, when they'll ask me about a staff member, like if they're having issues with them or something like that, and what should we do? And I tell them all the time, look, you can train technique, and you can train technical skills, and you can train anyone on an SOP, standard operating procedure, but you can't train you're like, you can't train the way people interact with people,
Right.
right? That's written into their code.
Right.
So hire well in terms of hiring people who are people, right? Like if they're customer facing.
Yep.
Like for instance, I have 3 kids, and sometimes I've had experiences at pediatric offices where I take them in, and I'm a stressed, tired mom with sick kids, and the front desk is just less than friendly, right? And they just act like you're an inconvenience, and it always baffles me, because I'm like, why would you choose to sit at the front desk, of a pediatric office, or why were you hired for this role? And so it's just something to think about, when you think about your customer interactions and experience. Who are you hiring? Are you hiring people that you get along with in the interview? That you have chemistry with, because those are the people you want talking to your customers.
Well, and since we take a little tangent on this, which is great, the way I've always viewed it is, you've got people that have high skill. Right. And then you have people that are somewhere on, they're high or low skill. And then you have people on the range of high and low culture. Right. The ones you want are the high skill and the high culture.
Yes.
The ones you want to get, which are getting harder and harder to find. She's hiring. There you go. If you're out there,
hiring
go.
Copywriters.
But the ones you want to get rid of are the low skill, low culture. The high culture, low skill, those are the ones you want to figure out how to get them all the skills. People don't look at it that way. The great companies I've been around, the great entrepreneurs I've seen, that's just intuition on what they do on there. But I'm guessing that pediatric office, which will remain unnamed, didn't. At this point in time, they'll just take technical as opposed to any sort of culture. Let's get a little bit more to the strategy of this. So we've got the brand, we've got messaging. Actually, you know what? Let's take one step back. What are some effective ways to start, and I know this would be probably a week-long seminar that you would do, but give maybe a couple of examples of exercises or someone could do to start to think about how to conceptualize their mission, their brand, however you want to define it on that.
Yeah, so any startup, I think most startups do a business plan. I would hope so.
Some of them do.
I would hope so. Please do one. It's very eye-opening, and it forces you to do these exercises. But I think the ones, exercises for a business plan that I find to be most valuable, and we support our clients in this too, is like a SWOT analysis. So obviously, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses in the market? What are your opportunities, and what are your threats? That coupled with a very in-depth competitive analysis. Which this is a good segue into, talking about how you get started on your strategy. But doing those things really will help you to define that brand story we talked about earlier. So this actually comes before the brand story, obviously, right? Because you got to figure out who you are before you can figure out what you want to say.
I agree.
So, yeah.
Most people think about what they want to do before they ever figure out who they are. And they don't last very long.
Oh, yes. That, 100% of the time when clients or prospects come to me and I've tried marketing and it doesn't work for my practice or it doesn't work for my business. Well, it's because you're jumping straight to the tactics. It's missing.
I put an advertisement out with a nice little stock photo and nobody came for it. I just don't understand why.
But I did Yellow Pages. Oh, we need to talk.
I still get Yellow Pages, so I don't know why, but that phone book shows up from time to time. Thank you, GBTC. I don't know why I get it. Let's jump into the strategy part, because I think that comes next is, in any strategy is essentially good planning and good, planning techniques. But I think one of the things, and I'm sure you've got lots of stories on this, is actionable strategies. I've dealt with a lot of companies on the business side every now and then as the lawyer comes around where someone has a very ambitious, bold strategy, but there is no way they can execute upon it. Talk about marketing, because especially I would figure there's a lot of things where people are like, well, we're just going to go ahead and do an ad at the Super Bowl. Not really executable, not practical. What's the best practices that you see on not only designing those strategies, but making sure that they're something that's realistic?
So one of the most crucial parts of developing a marketing plan, and we call that marketing development.
Okay, there you go.
That's the technical term. Marketing development plan is developing a marketing program, essentially. And there's several steps to this process. And one of the most crucial ones is often the most frequently overlooked, which is defining your goals and your business objectives.
There you go.
So when we were talking about earlier, people typically jump straight to the tactics. The thought process usually is for business owners, I should probably be doing some marketing. I'm going to do, what do you think the first thing is they jump to?
Probably bet social media.
Social media.
It's those things those kids are always on these days. I'm sure that'll get me some more
business. Latest and
business.
greatest thing. And we're not mocking you guys, but you've got it.
If you're mocked, then it's probably a little bit of truth there. Just
we're
admit
truth
it.
tellers
We're okay.
here.
We're okay.
So they jump straight to social media, whether it be organic posting. That's always the first thing people ask about, is someone to manage my social media.
Well, yes. Can you please answer that question?
But that's not a revenue driver. That should be the first place you put your marketing spend. Come on.
No. Well, hold on. Let me defend, because
Okay.
I do represent that person right there.
Okay, talk to me.
We are of the generation that missed growing up with social media. The best thing I had was a Game Boy growing up.
It's time to learn.
It is time to learn. However, we don't know how to manage, and utilize those. It's a knowledge. I'm going to say it's a knowledge gap versus, well, maybe it's a little bit of just.
So in the last conversation you and I had when we sat down, we talked about you can do anything with processes.
You can do anything with processes.
And I have a good process for social media management.
Oh, there you go.
And so typically that is what we hand over to our clients.
Okay.
And we do offer social media management services. We do, because what kind of marketing agency would we be if we didn't?
Sure.
But when, typically my clients come to me and they have tight budgets.
Right.
They just finished dental school. There's a lot of debt there. There's investing in construction, which I don't even want to talk about the price per square foot on a new build right now for a practice. It's, heartbreaking. But they're investing in all these things. They just took out a small business loan for their practice, and they do come with me with limited budgets, and I want to optimize their budget as much as possible. I don't just want to take their money. I want to make it work for them. And so typically with social media management, I tell at least my startups, this is something you can easily manage internally, and I'm going to teach you how.
To a startup person is, okay, that's another thing that I have to do.
I know, but that's what the word delegation is
for. There we go. That's a good process. We'll go back to delegation and process. Okay.
So I teach them basically how to make this part of one of the roles on their team, and then how to execute on that on a regular basis.
What are the typical, going back to those goals and objectives? And I know you guys are predominantly focused in the dental, the DSO market, but help everybody that's listening think about what are those big buckets of goals and objectives for marketing? Because, we all know, okay, well, it's called make more money, right? But maybe that's not the case. How do you guys look at setting goals and objectives?
Right. So business objectives and marketing objectives are two different things.
Right.
And a lot of times they're thought of as the same thing.
Correct.
So a business objective is, we just had our annual review or, historical analytics over the last year, and revenue's down.
Right.
Revenue needs to be higher.
Always.
That's a business objective.
Yep.
Or, our attrition rate, we're bleeding customers. We need to fix that.
Yep.
Those are business objectives. Marketing objectives are, okay, we need to increase revenue. So does that mean adding additional services for existing customers? Or does that mean prospect acquisition? What does that mean? And so those would be your marketing objectives.
Got it.
So once you've defined your business objectives and you've defined your marketing objectives, then from there, that's when strategy comes into play.
Got it.
So typically the business objectives have been skipped, the marketing objectives have been skipped, the strategy gets skipped, and they go straight to tactical. So just make sure when you're thinking about marketing, start at the beginning. Don't try to jump to the end.
I see them do that a lot, right? Which is, well, I've got the objective. I need to make more money.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, now let's do marketing for that.
Yeah, exactly.
But as you just put out, right, they need to look at what are the factors of revenue generation, and then how does marketing lead to tie in to that. And that's where they start getting their marketing objectives for. And I think many people miss that.
There's so many technicalities that go into that when you're thinking through those things.
In looking at a new startup, how do you see the world as far as allocating your strategies? There's digital strategies. There are still, I went to my mailbox this morning and I still think I got about, a boatload of junk mail that came through. Mm-hmm. How do y'all look, or how do you start trying to address which types of, I guess, really not strategies, but channels in order to use as far as your strategy planning? planning.
Right. So once you develop your objectives and you move on to your strategy, and your strategy is, okay, we need more customers, essentially, at a high level. So our strategy needs to be maybe a multi-channel campaign.
Okay.
So that would be your tactics. And so from there, you would say, okay, we need to utilize, and I'm a firm believer in integrated multi-channel marketing.
Define for everybody what multi-channel means.
So
because I've heard multi-channel, omni-channel. I think there's some other channels that are out there, including the TV channel.
Those are pretty, similar.
Okay, there he goes. But help set that for us there. Multi-channel,
so what
omni-channel.
a channel is basically a touch point or platform that you're using to communicate your message and get your marketing out. So that can be billboards, or at a higher level, that's called out-of-home advertising.
Okay.
So there's out-of-home advertising. There's direct response advertising, which is going to be direct mail and email.
Right.
There's digital, obviously, which is the most well-known one. There's search, paid search and organic. There's print. There's, event marketing, grassroots marketing. There's so many different types of marketing, which is why the objectives and the strategy, I don't keep harping on this, but it's why they're so important, because your channels that you develop your campaigns around are determined by that. So for instance, if I'm like, just not enough people know about us, if that's my objective, then I'm going to look at brand awareness campaigns, which would, if I'm doing a multi-channel or omni-channel campaign for brand awareness and I'm Pepsi or Coca-Cola, I'm going to be looking at billboards all over the place, TV spots, you mentioned Super Bowl ads, radio, which we're trending more towards podcasts and streaming at this point, but those sort of mass media, as we call it, mass media. But if I'm looking to talk to someone one-on-one and share my brand story, and I'm doing a hyper-targeted, meaning I have defined the exact prospect I want to pinpoint, right? Age, income, area. You can go as far as for some of our practices, they want to target families, and we can get that data and see if there's children in the households, So it's pinpointing your profile, which targeting is part of your plan we talked about.
Right.
And so if you're doing acquisition or prospect marketing, you're going to want something that's more one-to-one marketing. Yeah. So that's why, those objectives are so important, because that's going to steer you in the direction of the tactics and the channels that are going to be most effective for the goal you're trying to achieve.
And it's interesting because we're talking about all this detail that goes into effective marketing versus, again, what is the typical story of marketing doesn't work. All those steps are missed. Let me ask you one. What is some innovative aspect, or maybe just something you see on the horizon with regard to marketing through those channels that people maybe not understand, like something that's coming of, I don't know, you tell us. What's something out there we may be not knowing about effective ways to use one of those channels, either social media or search or whatever?
Yeah, I get typically a lot of questions around the difference between paid search and organic search, and how those are two different strategies, and they are two very different strategies. So some of you may be well-versed in this, so I apologize if this is a little elementary, but the majority of the audience that I speak to is not as familiar. So search is a huge component of your marketing plan, and regardless of your objectives and what your marketing plan is, organic search engine optimization should really be on everyone's list. Because as you mentioned earlier, if you invest, $10,000 in a beautiful site, or $5,000, whatever your price point is, but it's still a beautiful, sexy site, if you're not doing SEO, it is literally sitting out there, and your existing customers and maybe your family is going to look at it.
Actually, I'm the example of that for my first website. I wouldn't have called that first website a sexy website whatsoever. But the good news is nobody could find it. Yeah. It wasn't even listed, I think, in the World Wide Web somehow. I'm like, I don't know how you have to do these things.
Yeah,
sometimes we take for granted what Wix does, and when you try to do it, by other means. But it's something that people just don't understand today, that it's so data driven that if you don't have the right data on it, it can't connect with all the the bells and whistles that are out there.
And a lot of the horror stories I see are, you mentioned Wix, or, I don't want to throw
hey, it's okay. It's like when we have LegalZoom, people bring us their documents. We're like, we can fix it.
Oh, see, I own that. I am LegalZoom.
Well, there you go. Well,
but
there we go.
I don't have to do that
All
anymore.
right. Well, it's been nice having you on here, Nicole.
But you've opened my eyes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so, when a lot of times I encounter clients who I just don't understand why I'm not showing up. I just don't understand why I'm not getting new patients or customers or whatever. Okay, well, we'll do a deep dive of your site. I'm going to look into your site. We do like an audit or a health check, we call it.
Yeah.
Site was built by the client himself on Wix. No optimization. The content's all copied paste from other websites. Big no-no. Don't ever do that.
Yeah.
And, I see like 90% of the sites I review are copied content.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the biggest no-no in web development. And so I tell them, and they're like, can you fix my site? It doesn't work like that.
Nope. When I asked somebody to fix my site, they went, that's easy. We're going to throw it away. We're going to do a new one.
That's exactly what it is. And I always find those to be the hardest conversations, especially if they've been with a previous vendor before and this vendor took advantage of them, which happens sadly all the time in dentistry.
One of the biggest calls I get for demand letters from people is
releasing their website rights.
Releasing the website, or they're just disappeared and I can't get anything. And can you do a demand letter? And you're talking usually $5,000 to $15,000 that small claim court you could do something with. But there's not much to do.
I actually had this very phone call with a client this morning, and it breaks my heart.
It does.
I just want to help them, and he's asking me, please type something up as far as like your perspective and your opinion on what they didn't follow through as far as like output that they promised.
Sure.
And so I did that. I'm always willing to help in those areas. But yeah, I mean, it's so important to really to take advantage of the specialists that are out there, right? Like, there are people trained in these areas. You don't have to burn $10,000 with the wrong vendor or do it yourself and then have to redo it again. Lean on the experts. They're there.
Well, let's talk about, I guess I got two more big questions for you. So one, is in the medical field, in the legal field, and anywhere that we're looking for lead generation. I go on LinkedIn, I go on the internet now, I get emails of, come to us, we'll get you 10,000, leads by X amount of time. It's not true that they can do those things. And most people would go, oh, but what are the right tactics to do lead generation? Is it, I think I know the answer, but I'm not going to say it. How do you see getting those leads to really do lead generation for those companies that are trying, like for professional services, like in the dental field?
Right. So with lead gen, we really think that content is huge right now. So podcasts, for example,
there you
are
go.
A great way to do it.
Check another box, Nicole. Thank you.
Doing everything right.
So far.
And then also like, blog posting or sharing free resources, right?
Sure.
Like download this social media calendar or download this how-to on setting up your Google My Business page. And then from there, downloading those sort of resources and asking for an email or whatever. And then following up, hey, I saw you're interested in learning more about this. I'd love to have a one-on-one call with you to talk through these things with you. So content is huge for lead gen. Also networking and events and things like that, participating in conferences.
Right.
I know in dentistry is a big thing.
Yeah,
the
they're big.
Circuit.
Right.
I mean, a lot of my clients, they'll do events, and they'll say, how many patients am I going to get out of it? And, well, you're going to get a lot of leads.
Right. But you got to go close those.
Yeah,
leads.
but you can expect maybe 2 to 3 patients from an event.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and on the lead side, talk about, companies marketing, leads, sales, and closing sales. How do you view that process as far as effective ways? Like in a dental practice, right? You're going to get lots of leads, but how do you look at marketing and its role in actually closing those leads into customers or clients?
I find a good CRM or sales pipeline extremely vital. And I've been in a lot of hyper-growth corporate environments. That for sure is a must-have. There are free ones out there to utilize if you don't have it in your budget, but it doesn't hurt to invest a little bit if it's going to, feed your sales pipeline. But a CRM, and we use we upgraded, but we use Asana, which is a project management software, and we love it. It helps us to keep, on top of all of our project management and campaign management, obviously, but we also use it for, just client record keeping, right? Like, If we have a prospect or a lead and we talk to them, then we create a profile for them. And I'll talk to a lead probably 5 times before they end up deciding to come on with Transcendental. And that's because they've been burned in the past, or they're skeptical about marketing, or there's, we're talking about lead gen. Education is huge, especially if you're in a specialized industry, like law or healthcare or marketing. I know in dentistry we talk a lot about patient education, and it's the same for our industries. Like, we need to be able to, people don't trust what they don't understand.
Exactly.
And most people in my industry don't understand marketing, at least the way I do it. That sounds really cocky. It's true. And so, being able to educate them is a huge part of our process. And I don't even like calling it a sales process. I call it more of like an onboarding process.
Sure.
Because we look at our clients as family big time. We call it the Transcendental family. And so I like to get to know them a little bit before, and I think they enjoy that component too, versus jumping right into the proposal or the sale and the contract. And we get to know each other. We have several calls, and then this entire time I'm using this CRM to basically create a profile of who they are, because unlike a lot of marketing vendors in this industry, we really customize our programs and our services around the client. And we approach them all based on who they are and their brand stories. And so we outline all of that in this software. And so I think having a software that allows you to really get to know your customers and keep track of those sorts of things is really important. And then making sure you follow up regularly, and that somebody is designated as responsible for those touch bases. And then always being willing to, again, educate or answer questions, right? Like, do you just have any questions or concerns? Video conferencing is huge right now, and people expect it. And that was something I didn't do early on. I just did phone calls. And then I started realizing, especially because of the trust aspect, they need to see my face. They need to see the person behind this, and so now we do only video conferencing.
Okay. Yeah, trust is a big, especially for the fields of, what we do as professionals, to be able to connect. And so many clients I've never met face to face, always through, a video chat with Zoom and everything else. So it's fascinating.
I still travel to every single shoot.
Do you?
I travel at least once a month to every single practice because it is so important to me. To see my clients face to face.
No, that makes sense. Contracts were a little bit different. We don't have to watch them. We don't have to watch them.
I'm not judging your method. I'm just saying that's
but
like
if we had photo shoots, we definitely go do some cool photo
really
shoots. Those are great.
Well, and I could technically send somebody, but
it's
for
a critical
me,
moment.
like, I do this because of the relationships.
Right.
And if I lose that with my clients, those friendships, it just isn't as fulfilling for me.
No, I get it. I get it. All right. So if we've got the brand, image, identity, we've got strategy.
Yes.
We talked about technology, the channels and everything. Last part is, the data.
Right.
What are those key data metrics that, that everybody needs to be considering for their marketing strategy?
Yeah. So the last part of your marketing plan is your measurement plan, which is how are we going to track it?
Right.
And how do we determine success? Those are the 2 components. So how are we tracking it? Meaning, what mechanisms are we using? Are we using a call tracking line, a landing page? Are we using Google Analytics? If you're doing organic search or digital advertising, Google Analytics is a very helpful tool. You should be checking that on a monthly basis. So those are all the, different, there's a lot, but there's lots of different mechanisms. So defining what those mechanisms are for tracking. And then from there, defining, okay, what are the metrics we're looking at? So are we looking at call volume, leads? Are we looking at leads? We talked about lead gen earlier. Are we talking about actual acquisition, meaning did they schedule a consultation? Did they schedule an appointment? Did they make a purchase? And a lot of vendors, marketing vendors, especially now in this digital age, their reporting is impressions and clicks.
Right.
And then it's like, have a nice day. Thanks for paying.
Oh, yeah. We went through that process too.
Yeah. And so, we are extremely in-depth in our analytics and reporting. And so we take it all the way to the ROI. So you'll know, okay, how many impressions, clicks, but beyond that, how many calls, how many website forms were submitted, how many appointments were scheduled.
Right.
Ultimately, what is the value of the appointment that was scheduled and how much did you spend to get them in the door, right? Cost per acquisition is a metric that everyone should have in their measurement plan. This is basically how much each customer costs you to get them in the door.
If you watch any Shark Tank, at some point in time, they ask that question every single time. What's your cost per acquisition?
Does Mark Cuban?
Mark Cuban likes that line. They all like that line. It's one of those just, necessary things. Is how much does it cost you to get your? Yeah. You should every now and then, but anyway.
I should go on there.
Got to have something pretty snazzy to sell.
I'll think of something.
So then talk about this as an iterative process too. Mm-hmm. So we've gotten through the whole part there, and now we've gotten our measurements. Mm-hmm. We've seen where we are. Talk about what we do with that information.
Right.
And then kind of how we continue to move that process forward the next year.
Right. So how do we define success? And you mentioned earlier actionable, right? Making your marketing actionable. Well, your measurement plan is what makes it actionable.
Okay.
So when you define, okay, I'll just use new patients because that's my language. Do you want 10 new patients or do you want 50 new patients, right? And do you want implant cases or do you want Invisalign cases, right? These are your metrics for success. And how many do you want? And then from there, you analyze that against the results of the campaign, the goals and benchmarks, the objectives you set earlier on. And then you say, okay, looking at this omni-channel campaign that we just executed, we had wanted 10 new patients from this touch point and we got 5. Okay, so what's going on here? And then you do a deep dive into seeing why didn't we reach our objective? Is the targeting off? Is the message wrong? Is the creative wrong? Is the audience wrong? Like what's happening here? Or is the channel wrong? And sometimes we see that, especially in certain areas of the country. We'll test something and we're like, this isn't working here. Like direct mail, in some cases, there's more urban areas, it doesn't work as well. And so we'll say, okay, we'll take that investment and shift that over for the next campaign or get rid of that channel altogether. So just constantly, after every marketing program completes and looking at that attribution period. An attribution period is what we define as basically a time period that you're saying customers that come in are attributed to the campaign during this time period.
Right.
And so looking at that and basically saying during this time frame, what did we learn essentially that's going to help inform our marketing program ongoing. And we talked about earlier why people should do marketing. And really, when you think about business decisions, it's not just about growing your company. It's about making informed business decisions.
Right.
And if you don't have the analytics from marketing to be able to make those informed business decisions, then, you're kind of just flying blind a little bit,
No, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Last question, and then also a plug for you too, which is a small business owner. This is a lot for them to be able to do, and it's so important. Yeah. Which is why a lot of times I think a lot of small business owners, entrepreneurs go, it's just too much. Let's just do some marketing. Professional, right? That's one of those big messages I hope everybody gets is you want a professional, the right professional, not just any professional to help you. Last question for you. What are those key attributes when you're trying to find someone to an agency or someone there to partner with a company on the marketing? What are the things that an entrepreneur should be doing to evaluate before they hire that person?
So typically it begins with price shopping. That's usually where small business owners start.
That's always where small businesses start. Limited cash.
So I think it's really important to understand that when you're getting bids, especially like on websites, for example, it's not apples to apples.
Right.
We mentioned those copied content websites. Okay, so if somebody quotes you $2,000 for a website and then somebody else quotes you $5,000, maybe the person that quoted you $2,000 has copied content that's never going to index in search, and maybe the person that quoted you $5,000 is writing all new SEO optimized copy, right? That coupled with making sure that your site meets ADA, WCAG guidelines.
Wow, that was a lot there.
I know, it's a lot of acronyms. So what that means is the American Disabilities Act, there are now guidelines on website UI and design. And so I've actually maybe seen 2 other companies in dentistry who do this the right way. But because a lot of web developers will use plugins, which are actually not compliant.
Okay.
The site has to be actually coded to these standards.
Okay.
Yes. So that's an important thing to ask when you're shopping for a website as well. The other thing is size of the website. So if you get a 5-page website, you basically got your home page, your contact page, your About Us page, maybe your reviews page, and then where do you talk about your services? And if you're in dentistry especially, or law, I mean, there's a lot of
things that we do.
Content to say, so that's something that's important as well. But as far as overall, sort of high-level things to consider, asking for referrals is huge. Talking to people who've been through the experience and understanding what that client dynamic looks like. Like, do they answer when I call? Am I always talking to somebody different? Am I always leaving voicemails? Those are things you can glean out of talking to referrals. Always ask for samples of their work. Always make sure that you own the rights to everything they produce for you.
That's huge. Because so many times you don't, for whatever reason. And so making sure that you will, or at least at a minimum, have a royalty-free license to the things that are in it. But ideally, you own the entire content of the website. That's a big mistake I see a lot of entrepreneurs make.
Yep. It's huge. And not just the website, but like artwork. Just making sure that they're not going to hold anything hostage, because at the end of the day, if you paid for it, it's yours.
That's right. I
mean, I'm not a lawyer, but
yeah,
I think so, right?
Not always. Not always. It's called a contract. You get what you pay for in the contract.
Oh yeah.
So call your lawyer. Make sure you get the right contract.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much for coming here. We're always glad to have you. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about, maybe specifically that you see as up and coming in the dental advertising that maybe we're not aware of, or others would be like, oh, that's interesting?
Retargeting is a huge thing right now. So that means someone visits your website and then you're running digital ads that target the people who are already warmed up to your brand, essentially. People always ask, do I do digital advertising or do I do social media advertising? And my response to that is always, digital advertising is people actively already looking for your services. The need state is already established. Whereas if you're advertising to them on social media, those are cold leads. They don't necessarily have a need for your services.
Right.
So you're kind of wasting those impressions.
Got it.
So just something to think about. As far as up and coming trends, I'm trying to think. Have you heard of Web 3.0?
There's a whole nother conversation on Web 3.0.
I know. I'm not going to go into it today. But the wheels are turning in my head of how we can use this in our industry, and it hasn't quite clicked yet, but we'll get there. But the biggest thing really in dentistry is analytics. If your marketing company or any vendor isn't giving you proof of what they're doing for you at the end of the day and what you're spending your money on, then you need to find a new one.
Perfect. Nicole, thank you so much for coming. And thank you for taking the time to listen or watch us. If you're listening to us on our audio version on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please click subscribe or leave us a comment. Let us know, just making sure we're adding value. If you're watching us on YouTube, same thing. Leave us a comment and click subscribe. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks.
Bye, guys. Thanks for listening.